Well, this is a checking in video for the sewing circle, or the clique, as I like to call it. I'm never told, shall not be infringed this, but I was never fully comfortable with the term sewing circle. I thought it was kind of like mamby-pamby, but it's good. I don't mind it, but when Corey and all them came around and got involved, and then it just started to be called the circle, I was much more comfortable with that. But saw a video yesterday where Shafe had announced that he was just getting out of YouTube jail, and I commented, well, I noticed at first that the comments were turned off, and so I sent him a personal message, said, hey man, are you aware the comments turn off? He opened them up, and I replied, I'm like, man, I'm glad to see that you were actually on restriction and not the sewing circle running out of gas. I do feel like we've gone through quite a few topics, to use a fancy term, ad nauseum, just really explored it from several different angles. But I feel one that we've danced around, and something that I'm trying to stretch my limits on, and it's related to why Shafe was on restriction, potentially the reason, and it's to do with critical race theory. And here over the last couple of weeks, I've been close to doing akin to the series that Sned would do, where he's like, what I'm reading, maybe put some things up like, hey, what I'm watching. And I've been watching quite a bit of progressive leaning media, left leaning media, because I wanted to figure out what the critical race theory thing is. Because being in Florida, you get an idea, and by and large, the theory, or those who subscribe to it, or those of the woke movement, just get rubber stamped the enemy, the problem, what's wrong. And the more I thought about it, the more I didn't really understand it. I had a friend. To call him a friend in high school is a stretch. I would call him a friend now, but when he graduated, he went to Florida A&M, and I went to USF, and from his graduation to now, coming back in contact with him on Facebook, he's a black man, and he has just a very different perspective, like anti-Jesus and very, very woke kind of posts. And he and I have gone back and forth on a couple of things, and I'm not your typical right-leaning person. I'm more of like an old school civil rights sort of person. My thought was that it was the right thing was to be colorblind and to judge a person on the basis of their actions and their character solely. So it's right, but it's also potentially wrong, and I wanted to look into that. Like, I didn't understand it. And the basis of this critical race deal, from what I've seen so far, is that the civil rights movement has in fact failed. The original civil rights movement is a failure. The case they make for that is there are still ghettos that are impoverished. There are still people of certain ethnicities that have trouble with access to health care. So therefore, more action is needed to produce equal outcome, to produce core equity. So, for example, let's dedicate this in percentages of disadvantage. 1, you're black or you're of color. That's minus 35%. 2, you're female. That's another minus 35%. So therefore, in this critical equity, you push up 70% to bring a level playing field. There's more to it than that. There's some nuances to it, but it's an interesting time when you have Asian people, like non-white people, suing to abolish affirmative action. So where does affirmative action meld with critical race theory? It's just a wild situation, but not as wild as if you take your black plus 35%, you're female plus 35%, you're gay another plus 35%. Boom. White House press secretary. Just it's that policy in action, running absolutely roughshod, as if these are the most important things that the government needs to be involved with. And maybe they are, maybe they aren't. I don't know. I had for the longest time thought that racism was going to be gone. Like, my dad's generation passing away would sort of be the end of it, and we'd have like this sort of colorblind movement moving forward. And then it seemed to be after Obama was elected, it really brought it out, opened my eyes to it on both ends. It opened my eyes to how the minorities reacted to that, and then it opened my eyes to the pushback of the conservative whites. So, not sure if anybody's at all interested in talking about it, but it's interesting the results of it. It's interesting how it makes us feel. My question is how big of a deal is it really? I mean, it's a shame if a group of people gets marginalized. Critical race theory has at its root that racism is established in the system itself. It's not just a matter of being colorblind. So the laws are actually skewed to favor a certain group. So you use laws to push back. What say y'all?